Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are. I'm your session moderator, Kendra Lake, and today's presentation introducing the MiALA OER certificate is going to be starting shortly. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping items to share. First, we ask that you keep your microphone on mute until you need to ask a question. You can also enter your questions into the chat box, and we will be having a Q&A portion of the presentation towards the end of the session. We'll collect all of the questions at the end and read them out. We also are recording this session today. And lastly, closed captioning is available throughout the session. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to the MiALA OER team.
How do you like that? I already screwed up. Okay, Tina, are you sharing your screen? There we go. Hello, everybody. We are so happy to see so many of you here to learn about a project undertaken by several members of the Michigan Academic Library Association's OER interest group. Next slide. Today, we are going to talk about how our team tackled the task of revising and remixing an already existing OER training tool called Texas Learn OER for use in Michigan. And before we started, I saw that Judith Sebesta, who presented yesterday in this conference on that Texas Learn OER tool, is here. And so I wanted to just give her a shout out and thank her very much for her help and support as we worked through this project. Thank you. So there's a brief outline here. We will describe the history, the scope, and the organization of this project, and then we will talk about how we work together to make important decisions related to the content, the design, and the implementation of Michigan Explore, is what it's called. And lastly, we'll describe some data collection, marketing plans, and future upkeep of this training tool. So I'll introduce us now. Presenting today will be Molly Letterman, faculty librarian from Washtenaw Community College. Tina Mullins, research and OER librarian from Saginaw Valley State University. And I am Christina Radishowskis, public services and outreach librarian from Aquinas College. Before we get started, we have a couple of questions for you. Next slide, Tina. So we're going to ask you 3 questions just to get an idea of who's out there in the audience. So the first question, I think I'll just, oh, Tina, will you start that first question?
I'm not sure why it's already filled in. But.
Oh dear. Maybe if we end. Okay. Technical difficulties, of course.
Are people able to answer this poll?
This happening? There are people filling out this that we just can't see it. So I don't know what's happening.
Oh, you can't see it.
Oh, we can't see it.
Oh, they were given it when Zoom opened. It was up.
Oh.
Thanks, well, Lauren.
Fascinating. Okay. Then I share, maybe I'll just share the results that I see so far. How about that? Because it looks like I can push a button, but I can't see it. So I can't see it on the screen. Okay.
Well, I can see it.
Okay. So can you share it?
57% of people are librarians, 33% faculty, 5 administrators, and 5% other.
Okay, I wonder if that might be some students too or something. Okay, well, we have another question too. So, I don't know how to get to that. Maybe we'll just skip this part.
Or Tina, do you want me to launch it?
Yeah, I launched it. I can only see one question.
I got it.
The first question.
There we go. I got it.
Okay. Can people see that we are asking how you are involved in or with OER? Yes. But you can see it. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Typical Thursday. Whatever. Okay. Looks like this is working successfully. Give just a second.
Okay, we've got most everybody. I'll end it and share.
And it looks like we kind of run the gamut here of just about everything. I do see that 30% of our attendees are not really involved in OER at this point. So that this tool could be especially useful for you. And then we have one further question, and that is what kind of training have you had, if any, in the world of OER? Okay, it looks like the summit has been very helpful for many of you. And a lot of you are self-taught and have just watched webinars and things like that. And then about a quarter of you have taken an official course or certification. So that's pretty cool too. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Molly, who will describe the project and how we tackled it.
Awesome. Can we go to the next slide, Tina? Oh, perfect. Okay, so before we jump in, and Tina's going to give you kind of a tour and overview of the actual certificate itself, I just want to give you a quick background on the project and kind of how it came to be. So Tina saw the Texas Learn OER that we mentioned earlier, the certificate. Maybe you attended that session yesterday, and I know Judith is here from Texas with us. She brought that certificate to an OER interest group meeting through the Michigan Academic Library Association and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if Michigan had an online self-paced certificate too that could be used across the state? And this sparked a bunch of conversations within the OER interest group, and some of the things came to the forefront. We talked about how every institution in college across the state is at a different level, a different stage of OER development. And we saw that with our polls here, right? Some of us aren't involved at all. Some of us are, deep into it. We have lots of them, at all at different stages. We talked about how all of us are scrambling to get in front of the various stakeholders in order to move that needle of OER on our campuses, whether it be administrators, faculty, librarians, anybody who's involved, to get them on board to understand what OER are, that foundational background knowledge that we need to get that started. And then we also talked about how we're all kind of recreating the wheel, right? Every institution is kind of working to develop materials and all of that stuff that you need to educate faculty and administrators and things like that. And so what if we had this thing, right? This standardized, out-of-the-box, self-paced tool that could be used at a campus, so that you wouldn't always have to recreate all that content, and could be something that you have that faculty can complete without the need of you, right, being in front of them, presenting on Zoom or presenting on campus. And so one of the things that we realized too was that a certificate like this would be really great, one, to kickstart a new OER initiative on campus, right? So for those of you who haven't even started yet, this is something that could move that needle, right? With low time and investment on your part. But also we thought, wow, what a powerful tool to pair with existing grant and incentive programs, because a lot of times, there's grants or incentives that we want to work with, but we still have to make sure that the people working on those OER projects understand the different Creative Commons licenses, understand what's an OER, what's a faux OER, what are the copyright things that I need to understand, and why should we use OER, right? All of these really important questions. So the last thing too that we talked about was when you have something that's standardized like this, it's really easy to translate into the language of your campus, right? If you know how long it takes to complete. If it has a certificate at the end that's automatically generated and says, I got this % on my OER certificate, it makes it really easy to translate into CEU credits or professional development credits or whatever the language that's being used on your campus. So we thought that could be a pretty seamless use there. Go ahead to the next slide. So, so we kind of said, so the OER IG said, yeah, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And this fantastic roster of people stepped up and volunteered and said, hey, we'll work on this. And I saw a bunch of these people are here with us today. So thanks for joining us. Feel free to throw stuff in the chat if you want to. And as we looked at this, and I want to give a special shout out too to Veronica, because Veronica really was our head wrangler in setting the meetings and kind of calling the group back and say, okay, where are we now? Who do we need to touch base with? And really help to move the project along that way. So you can go ahead to the next slide. And so one thing that we realized, the first thing that we realized as we started this project was, wow, this is a really big project and there's a lot of moving parts and pieces and we need to figure out how we're going to get this done. So we the first thing we did was set up a subcommittee kind of breakout and say, okay, let's create a big picture project management schema for this project so we know what to do. And we broke the project out into different phases. We thought about, okay, what are the steps we need to take? What are the tasks we need to do? And then we aligned specific tasks to each phase. As you can see, we set specific deadlines so that we would know, okay, and we worked backward. We were like, okay, we want to have this project done by summer. So in order to do that, we need to start uploading it. This is how much time we probably need to build the content in a website. This is how much time we probably need to edit content and update it and things like that. And we worked backwards to where we were at that point, way back in November. And as you can see with the different phases, we had, the project planning phase, which was this big document. We created then a Google Drive folder with, each phase had its own folder. Each phase also had its own tab on this Google Sheet so that team could keep track of what they were doing. And it also made it really easy for each team to check up on other teams, right? We could you can see directly who to contact, because with a big project like this, it's easy to lose track of who's working on what, when it was going to be done, and you end up kind of circling back. I think we've all been on those projects where you just circle back again and again, and you get to another meeting and everybody says, wait, who was working on that? What are we doing? We haven't made any progress. So this really helped us there. And then the best part too is that with such a deep group of people, with so many different people, we had everyone sign up for at least 2 different phases of the project, depending on their interests and skill set, right? And we were lucky to have a couple people who had great, web design skills and felt confident with that tech end, and other people who were like, oh, I'd love to dig in and help edit the content and adapt it for Michigan. So we had 5 phases of the project. I already talked about the project management. Our research team or research phase kind of involved everybody. We were deciding if we were going to use which certificate, and we picked Texas. There was also one created by Washington that we looked at as well. And then we answered questions like, well, what does this fall under? Who is this part of? And things like that. Content development was adapting it for Michigan, breaking it out into chunks so everyone could edit it, realign it, decide how we wanted it to look and feel for us. And then our quality control team did the final edits and then built it actually online. And then our last team was the communication and marketing team. And that group was really involved in those branding questions. And also, how are we going to get the word out? What are we going to do? How will we let people know this exists? For example, maybe we should present at the OER Summit conference. And then we looked at reporting and statistics and things like that. And I think this worked really well. I highly recommend it if you're doing a project to do this kind of working backwards, setting deadlines and breaking things out, especially when you have so many hands on deck, because that way everybody could contribute and participate. And it really made it really easy to track the project that way. And now I'll turn it over to Christina, who's going to talk about some of our challenges. You're muted still.
Yep, I know. Okay. Sorry again. So the tool that we were working with, the Texas Learn OER, was already effective and awesome, but we did want to make it our own. And so we did have some challenges to grapple with and some questions to answer. So I'm just going to go through those quickly. One, obviously, is what platform are we going to use? Is it going to be Google website, a blog, a LibGuide, would it be WebSpace on MiALA's webpage or the Michigan OER network? So we needed to figure that out. And then, also where is this going to live? How will people get to it? And then also we needed to figure out who can be our test users. Before we go live with this, we needed some people to test it out and make sure that it's navigable and that the certificate works and all of that kind of stuff. As Molly mentioned, we wanted to provide professional development credits or CEUs, and but we didn't know how to do that. Like, how do you say how many CEUs something is worth or whatever? We had no idea. So we had to figure out who to contact, how long is this thing going to take? And then who's willing, who's able, who has time to test this thing. Whoops, that's from before. And then we knew that we wanted to mimic Texas's Texas tool, right? We wanted to give a snapshot of what's going on in Michigan, what institutions have programs or incentives, or just what's going on in Michigan. But that information didn't seem to be aggregated anywhere yet. So we had to figure out, how do we collect that information to present it in this tool. Another issue was that we needed to make sure that this thing was going to we were going to keep up with it. Once it's done, it's not done, it's just ready, so like things change constantly, and this tool will only be as effective as it is up to date. So we had to figure out who's responsible for that. And then lastly, and probably most important, we needed to know, what are we going to call this thing? And so that was a conversation, and we went through a few iterations until we ended up where we are. So next, Tina's going to describe going through deciding a lot of answers to those questions, and how we decided on design and content and all of that.
Yeah, so our objectives for the content and design, we wanted that each module to be available as a standalone, so users could, use the tool as they needed, not necessarily have to use the entire tutorial. We wanted to break up sort of large areas of text and streamline the text. We wanted to update the content. We, of course, wanted to add the Michigan content, and we wanted to add interactive elements. So then we had our content development team that did an extensive review of the Texas Learn, and we went through and added Michigan examples and context and images. We edited for like a consistent voice throughout. We separated the learning modules, which contain like a concept review at the end, from the introduction and the Michigan sections, which did not have a content review. We updated content, for example, added the new code of best practices for fair use in OER. And then we had a instructional designer review it. She reviewed it in Google Docs before it became a site, and she had recommended making each module like consistent in format, for example, starting each with a video. So we did that. She's suggested making sure the language in the video matched the language in the text. Again, breaking up heavy text areas with infographics or bullet points, and reordering some sections for better flow of information, like since it's geared towards faculty and librarians, like putting the faculty benefits before the benefits for students. And then we got into the sort of technical and design development. So our requirements for the technologies was we wanted a free or low cost platform. We wanted something that was sustainable and easy to update, easy to use. We wanted something that would be available for multiple editors. Of course, we wanted it to be accessible and have the option to be interactive. And so we did some research on different platforms here, Canvas, Google Sites, Merlot, OER Commons, Pressbook, and WordPress. We decided on Google Sites. It's easy to use, it's free. Texas Learn was already in Google Docs and Google Sites, so it just made it really easy to get started. We didn't have to like reformat anything. It also integrates with all other Google tools, Google Forms, Google Sheets. So since we had already started with the Google Drive and Google Docs, it just made it really easy to get going with it. Then, as Christina mentioned, the hosting, we're a MiALA, we're a MiALA group, MiALA OER interest group. So we, initially thought, well, it would be hosted with MiALA, but then there's also some members of our group were part of the Michigan OER network. And so we thought maybe, that might make more sense since it's an OER tutorial. And we also contacted Michigan's colleges online. But again, we went with the Michigan OER network. They already had a Google site up, and it was just easy to have our site be added to what they already had. And then the other piece was the certification, which the Texas site had as well. And so we used Certify It, and that integrated with Google Sites as well. And here's what it looks like. So, and here we are, Michigan Explorer or Michigan Explore. Our implementation, this is the image within Google Sites. We had our quality control team created the site, made sure that we had consistent formatting, and we did a review of accessibility and navigation. And I'm going to go to the site, and I'm going to send you all. Oh, you already did it. The URL. So here we are, My Explorer. So we'll see that we have the introduction, and then our 8 modules, which I said have the concept review. So we have a section specifically on certification, information about the certification, marketing ideas, our copyright and attribution. Thank you specifically to Texas OER Learn. We have like multiple ways to navigate. We've got the table of contents here, the menu here. Then we also have, next and previous buttons. So like each module starts with the learning objectives, and then go into an introductory video. We broke up some of the text just with these text boxes. and some highlighted text boxes. And some of the longer modules we broke up into separate sections. So this one on copyright and open licensing, we broke up into 2 sections. And then, as I said, each module has the concept review. So that's in Google Forms. Then we have the Michigan section, which does not have a concept review, and all kinds of, statewide initiatives and legislation, publishing programs. So all sorts of information specific to Michigan. And then we've got our final assessment, which is where you would earn the certificate of completion by completing the assessment. And there's also some like demographic information that we ask for here. Now I will turn this back over to Christina, who is going to talk to us about what's coming next. Shoot, sorry, there we go.
Okay, so just like I said in the introduction, just because we're done doesn't mean we're done, right? So next slide, please. One of the first things that we needed to do once we had everything together and the chunks were made and the graphics were there and everything was that we needed somebody to look at it. The quality control subgroup did a fantastic job getting it ready for that, but then we wanted outside people to look at it. And one of the most fantastic ideas was one of our team members was from Wayne State, and she reached out to two faculty from the LIS program, Master's Library Science program, and asked them to share the link to this tool and an evaluation form with their students so that they could look at it. Those faculty members did not really do that though. So we didn't get as much student input as we had hoped. We did have a few students take that and fill out the evaluation form, which was different than the questions that we had listed on the actual Michigan Explore certification thing. So we have a little bit of that information. And then some of our colleagues were also asked to take a look at it and go through it from start to finish, take the assessment and whatever. And because it's summer and there are vacations and whatnot, and we didn't get a million people taking it like we wanted, but we did get some initial feedback. And so I'll go through that very briefly. We did discover that it took between 2.5 to 3 hours to complete it from start to finish. And that's kind of what we expected. And that's how we were able to determine the number of CEUs to suggest. We found that it was the review questions at the end of each module were either very or extremely helpful, and that the site was easy to navigate for those who took it. And so that was all great news. Additionally, we had 8 attempts made to get the certificate, and 7 of those attempts were successful. So now we have 7 people, or at least last time I looked, we have 7 people who have certificates. You saw that Tina scored an amazing 100%. I got one wrong, but I still got the award. And of those 7, 43% plan to use OER in upcoming classes, and 29% might use OER in upcoming classes. 3 of the people who took the certification test were staff, and so I'm not sure if maybe they don't have classes to implement, and so I'm not sure exactly what those numbers mean. So that's what we have so far. Tina, next slide. So we need to get the word out about this. As Molly suggested, one of our ideas for marketing was to use this summit as a marketing tool. And so we are viewing this conference as a launch pad for this tool. So we plan to, so we've told you all, check that off the list, but next, we'll send out notices to the MiALA membership, to some higher education listservs. We'll have this listed, linked somehow on the Michigan OER Network website. And then, of course, we all have our own networks of colleagues and faculty and administration. And so, as appropriate, we will share our information there. Oh, thank you, Judith. Judith is getting the word out too, I see in the chat. And amazingly, we already have 2 kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to call them pilot programs using the content from Michigan Explore. Tina's institution, Saginaw Valley State, will use it in a grant-funded OER training program, which is awesome. And you may have talked about that yesterday. I didn't attend. And then secondly, Davenport University will use the certificate program in a part of a professional development series that's called How to Make Your Class Affordable. And so I imagine that we'll get some feedback from that and see how it goes. Next slide. And then lastly, we will be collecting data. As I just mentioned, we'll use some of the feedback from Tina's program. Well, it's not just Tina's program, but the Saginaw Valley program and the Davenport program. But also we'll be looking at things like Google Analytics to see how people are getting to our site and how, you know, a little bit about how they're navigating, what they're clicking on, whatever. And then we'll have information from the final assessment questions while we're asking questions about the content of this training tool, but we're also asking for questions like, was this easy to navigate? You know, like evaluatory questions so that we have something to work with from people. And then also just an open-ended question, you know, do you have suggestions, questions, that kind of thing. We also, because that final assessment tool is there, we will be collecting number of institutions represented in the certificates, what positions are taking. So is it faculty, librarians, administration? And then, so we'll have that and we'll share that with the MiALA membership. We'll share it with the Michigan OER network. And then we'll find other ways to share that too. We just haven't decided on that just yet. And then, of course, all of that information will be looked at on a regular basis. And one of the challenges we came up with was like, who's going to keep this up and who's going to, you know, make sure everything's working all the time. And it looks like that the Michigan, the MiALA OER interest group will take ownership of this, and that will just be a regular task that is addressed on a yearly basis. And so we have made ourselves some work, but it's good work. And I think that's kind of all we have. So we are open to questions. We are open to suggestions. And we'll turn it over to all y'all.
Judith, do you have a question?
Oh, I just have to say how excited this makes me, you all. Tina, Christina, Molly, and everybody who was involved in this. It is just so gratifying to see this, and particularly to see the improvements that you've made on Texas Learn OER. In case you didn't hear at the beginning, I'm Judith Sebeste. I serve as the Executive Director of the Digital Higher Education Consortium of Texas, and we with Carrie Gitz, a librarian at Austin Community College, developed Texas Learn OER. And I tell you, this is better than Texas Learn OER, and you're already giving me ideas for improvements for what we call TLO. And the improvements that I'm seeing here are things like you utilized an instructional designer way before we did. And kudos to you for thinking to do that. I mean, an instructional designer is worth their weight in gold, right? We did have one that was a peer reviewer, but they came in quite late in the process. So kudos to you. We're only just integrating concept reviews at the end of the module. So we only had the summative assessment, Christina, I think, as you knew, and you all are doing better at that, obviously. And you're integrating a Google form for feedback, which we haven't had, and I think we'll do that now. So and Google Analytics, we've not really harnessed those like we should. We know who has completed the training, but we need to know, who is opening the training but not getting, past the first module, or where do we have a significant drop off throughout the module. So I'll shut up. I just want to say thank you. I'm going to spread the word about this.
Oh, thanks, Judith. Oh, and thanks again for Texas Learn OER, because without that, we would have, never had something to launch off of. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Any other questions? You can go ahead and put something in chat, or just unmute yourself too. We're really flexible over here.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing that we had planned to do interactive pieces to the tutorial, but that sort of, we didn't have the right platform or free platform to be able to do that. So that's another thing down the road.
I want to ask a question of the group as people think about other questions. Does this seem, one thing we were really curious about in presenting was, does this seem like something that would be useful to you or your institution? I'm just curious how many of you envision yourselves using this?
Also, I see we have a lot of team members here on the,
yes.
So if anybody wants to jump in and add something that we missed.
Yeah, this seriously was a huge group project, and we worked together very well. I think that we all put in the same amount of effort and dedication.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think was mentioned, but I want to reiterate it, I think it's set up well in modules so that if you really just wanted to talk about copyright to faculty or students or whomever, I think that you can just take that chunk and plug it into whatever you're using or modify it as you wish. You don't have to go through the whole thing if you don't want to.
Yeah, and I just noticed in the chat, Veronica brought up launching this certificate on campus due to an open access week in October. And that's something that we were talking about working on with the IG too, to have something that we can, like a promotional piece we can share out with a statewide that week too. So like, hey, you take this back to your institution to help promote it and spread the word too. So thanks for mentioning that, Veronica.
Yeah, that's the what Christina, follow up with what Christina said about using the modules separately. That's actually what we're doing at SVSU at Saginaw Valley State, is just using pieces of the a couple of different modules, not the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So one comment I have around this, and it's been kind of a theme I've noticed in the conference. I come from a smaller institution, and the wonderful things that people have created and shared and brought to light have really helped those institutions that maybe have less resources to dedicate to things so grand in developing something like a whole professional development certificate, or I was talking the code of best practices thing yesterday. It's like, this is amazing to have this as a resource for, you know, someone who might not have a copyright expert on campus, that kind of thing. So just a big thank you to the group and staff for all of that from the little guys.
I love it.
We do have a question in the chat. So who are the audience for the certificate? Faculty, librarians, or does it teach them how to create? Does it teach them how to create and adapt OER material? So just a couple of general questions there.
The certificate's for anybody who's interested in taking it, because it provides that foundational level of, you know, the copyright piece, but it does also talk about like adapting and adopting and creating content and things you need to consider, to consider when you're reviewing content. So I think it does kind of go into the depth and breadth that it could be helpful for anybody.
Yeah, I would say that it is an introductory piece though, and it doesn't go, you know, tremendously in depth of which tool to use to, you know, how do you edit things and, you know, that kind of stuff. And yesterday, Judith mentioned when she was talking about Texas Learn OER that they were considering making a, you know, theirs is also introductory, but they're thinking about making like a volume 2 kind of a thing with more sophisticated in-depth information. And I mean, that could be something that we consider in the future, but this is just like important base knowledge to understand when talking about or considering OER, and with a lot of helpful information and links out to other places to get more information.
We had also discussed whether it should be, you know, geared towards higher ed, or should we include K12, and we did some research and realized, you know, K12 already has some material. So we did really specifically, we did not include K12 material.
Yeah, so that Michigan portion is Michigan higher ed institutions that have programs and incentives and things like that.
Yeah. Thomas, did you have a question?
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. No, I didn't have a question. I just had a comment that I'm in Texas, San Antonio, and I'm relatively new to. I'm not relatively new. I'm totally new to it. I have done the LibreText training. They had a training in July that I went to, and this seems like a great gateway to get people involved. I understand you did this from the Texas template, and I was unaware of the statewide involvement, Texas statewide involvement in this as well until this conference. So I plan on getting involved through that end as well. But I also like what y'all have been doing, and plan on keeping tabs on y'all, and beg, borrow, and steal from y'all to improve what I'm doing, which is all we're trying to do, is improve what we're doing.
Right.
And this conference has been a real eye opener for me. And I'm really glad that, the Alamo College District in San Antonio has 5 community colleges that it manages. And they keep sending out stuff where they get stuff or they hear about stuff. And so they send it out district-wide. And that's how I found out about this. And that's also how I found out about LibreText, which uses OpenStax books. And so, yeah, this is just really great.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. That's wonderful. I like what you were saying too about like you know, that's the whole reason we wanted to do this, because we're all kind of begging, borrowing, and stealing from all sorts of different stuff. And here's something out of the box that you can use all of or parts and pieces of to do what you need to do.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
And we'll see in chat, Judith also mentioned the statewide Texas conference too, if you're interested, Thomas, or anybody else, if it's is it a virtual conference this year, Judith?
Yeah, I saw her type that in there, which is something I was going to do at the end of this conference, is to look and see what Texas has. So thank you, Judith, for posting that.
Yeah, Texas seems to have a lot going on OER wise. It's impressive.
Yeah,
for sure. So does anybody else have any questions or comments about this resource that's new and exciting? And we will be posting the slides up on the Sketch. There'll be a recording of this session in a couple of weeks. So all attendees to the conference will get notification when our recordings are up and ready. And in addition to this presentation, I wanted to invite everyone to feel welcome to join the Michigan OER Network. I've posted the link into the chat. We're a Google group of folks that are willing to share and learn from one another and support one another. So we'd be happy if you wanted to join us. We also have the upcoming lunch and network session following this session, if you'd like to attend that. And thank you all for attending. Presenters, do you have any final words that you wanted to share before we go?
Please,
I just want to
take a look at it and, try the certificate, give us feedback. We would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your time in attending this session. And Tina, Molly, and Christina, thank you so much for sharing everything about this great certificate. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference. Hopefully we'll see you at some future sessions when we've got a wrap up this afternoon as well. So everybody take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.